Okay, so now I'm going to proceed with troubleshooting walkthrough number 1. And this is really focused on sort of the real basic problems that could happen with a home user. Someone whose laptop or PC is connected at home to do basic home networking, like bringing up websites, getting to their email that their ISP has offered them, and it's not working. How do you troubleshoot that? Now, in all of these walkthroughs, if you're watching these videos and you're going through the walkthroughs because you yourself are trying to diagnose your problem, if you get to a point where I say, okay, you test this, does it work? Yes, let's move on. Well, let's say you tested that and your answer is, wait a second, Keith, no, it doesn't work for me. That means stop the video, you're done, move on to the next video. You know, unless you're just curious, but you should be able to follow through with me at each step, and if at some point we diverge and I'm continuing but you're stopped at a roadblock, that means you're done with this walkthrough, you're done with this video, move on to the next one. Now, if you're a home networking user, I would definitely recommend you watch all of this particular video for troubleshooting number 1, because I'm going to cover a variety of issues that could arise for networking at home. So if the first issue does not apply to you, the second one might, or the third one might. So just finish up this video, and then if none of these things apply to you, then you can move into number 2 and number 3 and go forward with that. Now, I'm also making an assumption. With all of these troubleshooting walkthroughs, one of the assumptions I'm making here is that you are trying to access something that previously was working, and all of a sudden now it's not. So you're trying to go to your Gmail account, or you're trying to access a website that you've gone to in the past. Maybe you were just looking at it 5 minutes ago, and now all of a sudden it's inaccessible. These things here are not designed for someone who's setting up a network from scratch. So if you're setting up your cable or DSL modem for the first time, or you're setting up a basic network and it's not working, this series of videos is not for you. This is for people who previously had access and all of a sudden it just stops, and how to diagnose that kind of thing. So as we go through these troubleshooting videos, we're going to start with sort of the real basic simple stuff and then get progressively more and more complex problems to diagnose. Okay, so the common problem we're going to have in all of these is I can't get to my favorite website. It just went down. Okay, so let's assume this is your setup. You've got a laptop, and you've got a cable or a DSL modem. Now in this particular case, I am showing a cable modem. How do you know it's a cable modem? Well, if you look in the back, if it's got this kind of a jack right here, this thing sticking out with a single hole in it, and it's connected to a cable that looks like this, that is a cable modem. Whereas a DSL modem, the jack on the back of it would connect to a wall plate that has, like, you know, your telephone outlet. You know how your telephone outlet has a different hole? It's got a hole that kind of looks like this top jack right here. Well, a DSL modem would have a jack that looks like that connects to the wall. But this is a cable modem. Now also, this particular 1A here, wired Ethernet, is going to assume that you're supposed to have a wired Ethernet connection. So, first question you got to ask yourself, is my laptop plugged into the network cable? And the answer is no. So you look at your laptop and you say, I've got a little open jack, a little open hole that looks like this, and there's nothing connected to it. So, logical thing. Find that cable. Now that cable is what we call an Ethernet cable. Hopefully in the DSL modem that you purchased, there was an Ethernet cable that came in the box. And plug it in to your laptop. Now, what does an Ethernet cable look like? Well, it's a cable that both ends of it look like this. Okay? Now you might say, well, wait a second, that kind of looks like the cable that my phone is connected to, right? My telephone has cables that look like this. You're absolutely right. One small difference, if you have an Ethernet cable and you hold it up right next to a telephone cable, these jacks are a little bit different in size, usually. Usually the Ethernet cable, the jacks are a little bit larger than the phone cable jack. If you tried to plug an Ethernet cable into just any phone outlet in your house, most likely it would not fit. Okay. Also, if you hold it up, you can actually see little wires inside of it. An Ethernet cable has a lot more wires than a telephone cable. A telephone cable typically just has like 2 wires in it and that's it. Whereas an Ethernet cable can have like up to 8 wires. There are different colors like brown, yellow, purple. So that's how you can distinguish it. So hopefully you got some kind of an Ethernet cable in the box with your DSL modem. So you would plug it in. So one end of it connects into this Ethernet jack. Remember how I talked about how your laptop has something called a network interface card that connects to the network, your NIC? Well, this is your NIC. This is your connection to your NIC. Actually, if I took off all the plastic and everything of this laptop and looked at what this jack was connected to on the other end, inside here, there's your network interface card. And that connects, and this is a network interface card right here. This cable modem has a network interface card. It's an Ethernet NIC connected right here. Okay, now hopefully you're done. Hopefully that fixed your problem. Now you might be saying, okay, Keith, I wish it did, but it didn't. I still have issues. Okay, maybe you're doing Wi-Fi. You know, most of the people these days are doing Wi-Fi, which means you're doing wireless. You have no physical wire to connect to that cable modem. Okay, if that's the case, then you probably have, at minimum, 2 pieces of networking hardware. You've got your cable modem and some Wi-Fi device called an access point. Now sometimes this Wi-Fi device is actually built into the cable modem. Some cable modems these days that they give you or sell you not only have a cable connection to the wall, but they actually have Wi-Fi built right into it itself. Hopefully you would know that. You know, if you don't, just dig out the box that this cable modem came into and look somewhere on the box to see if it's got integrated or implemented Wi-Fi. Otherwise, you should have some kind of a device like this that's got some antennas or something, and that's your Wi-Fi access point. If your Wi-Fi access point is a totally different box like this, it will have an Ethernet cable connecting to your cable modem. So you say, okay, great, I got those 2 pieces of equipment. These things are cabled right. My cable modem's going into the wall. Check, that's done. I've got an Ethernet cable running between my cable modem and my Wi-Fi access point. Check, that's done. Still, on my laptop, nothing's working. All right, so the first thing to check, is your Wi-Fi radio switch turned on? Now, tablets and smartphones don't have a physical switch to turn on or off the Wi-Fi, but most laptops do. So if you look on your laptop, somewhere on it, the side or the back or something, you'll have a little switch. Now in this particular case, it's showing red, which means, hey, it's not turned on. So let's go ahead and turn on the Wi-Fi radio. So we'll just move that switch over until it's green, and hopefully, if everything else is plugged in correctly, after about a minute for the Wi-Fi signals to connect and for your laptop to learn of its IP address and everything, then you will have connectivity restored. Now, someone who's watching the live stream asked a very good question. They're saying, is the DSL modem, or in this particular case, the cable modem, would this be considered a router? You know, does this device have an IP address and is considered the default gateway? In other words, in your room, if your laptop says, okay, I need to talk to somebody who's not in my room, who's not in my network, is this the guy he would talk to? Yes and no. As far as your laptop is concerned, this device, this white box here, your cable or DSL modem, is invisible. This thing most likely does not have an IP address. It just relays electrical signals. Electrical signals come in this purple cable here, the Ethernet cable. The electrical signal is changed in some way and then goes out the cable signal. But this device usually does not have an IP address itself, and it's invisible to the laptop. So in this environment, most likely your default gateway is the access point. This thing with the antennas here. This probably has an IP address. And this has been learned as the default gateway. Now, if you're directly connected, like if I go back to the previous slide, let's go back to that for a second. If this is your connection here, once again, this box is just translating electrical signals from one method into another method. So now, the actual default gateway, the router, would be owned by your service provider, which might be 5, 6, 10 miles away. You know, wherever this cable leads, if you're actually able to dig it up from the ground, go through your neighborhood and find out where it goes at the far end, there's probably a router 5, 6, 7 miles away. That is going to be your default gateway if you're directly connected. But if you have a Wi-Fi access point like this, then your Wi-Fi access point will be the default gateway. And somebody's asking, what's the difference between a router and a broadband router? The term broadband is usually used in reference to what kind of internet connection you have. As an example, you know, in my previous video, I talked about the old days, like the early to mid 1980s, before cable technology came out, before DSL technology came out, and all we had were dial-up modems to bring up our websites. Like America Online, that's the service provider I was trying to remember. Remember America Online, who was like the very first service provider, and you had to use a modem to call them, and then their page would sort of scroll across your laptop, and you had to wait like a minute for each page to load? Well, that was called a narrowband signal. So you got narrowband and broadband. Narrowband is like, you know, really kind of slow. Broadband means it's your fast, your quick internet connections. So both cable and DSL are considered broadband technologies because it provides a fast connection to the internet. Now, a router, the two are separate. Broadband refers to what kind of a connection I have. The term router means a device that's connected to two or more networks. In other words, a router is a device, for example. Let me just draw something here real quick. If I have a router, it's going to have at least two cables plugged into it. And all the devices on this side will be in my analogy of people in a room, these will all be people in the same room. These will all be devices who can talk to each other directly, who don't even need the router at all. So usually what you would see is that now at this point we're sort of leaving behind the world of home networking, although some of you guys might have this at home. Some of you guys might have, let's just make it simple, a couple of laptops. And these two laptops are plugged into something that you purchased called a switch. You know, maybe a Linksys switch or a D-Link switch or a Netgear switch or something like that. And then the switch in turn is plugged into the router. Well, everybody connected on this left-hand side of the router, when they get an IP address, their IP addresses will all have something in common because they are all on a common network. So for example, maybe everybody on this side, all of their IP addresses start with 111. So maybe this laptop is 1.1.1.2. This laptop is 1.1.1.3. So 1.1.1.2, when he wants to send some information to 1.1.1.3, he says, hey, he's in the same room as me. This is like my analogy of where you shouted across that crowded room, hey John, can you come over here for a second? I got to talk to you. So you can talk to each other directly through the switch. Now the switch is kind of invisible. These two laptops have no idea they're connected to a switch. The switch is just relaying, sort of invisibly relaying electricity from one cable to the other. They can talk to each other directly. Now, let's say that this device here, 1112, he says, I want to pull up the google.com website. And he learns via the domain name service, DNS, that that website is actually 8.8.8.10. Well, now he says, huh, interesting. I know that everybody who's in my room, in my network, is going to have an address that starts with 111. Clearly, this does not start with 111. So the device that's holding this website is not in my room. He says, okay, well, how do I talk to that device? Well, this laptop says, when I initially learned of my IP address, I also learned that there was another guy in my room who was 111.20. And that happens to be the IP address, the name of this interface where this cable plugs into on this router. So this laptop will say, okay, if I want to talk to anybody that is not 111, I need to give my information to this guy. And then he can send it on. And then this router on this other end here, this interface will have an IP address in a totally different room. Like that, right? Maybe everybody on this cable has IP addresses that start with 50.3.3. But the idea of a router is that he can take networking messages from one network and forward them onto a different network. Now, is this router directly connected? Is his cable directly connected to Google's website server? Probably not. So he probably has to offload that message to another router and then to another router. So your message probably has to go through maybe a dozen or 24 networks before it finally reaches the server that's holding Google's website. But that's what a router does. A router is aware that he's connected to multiple networks. Like this switch right here, this switch probably doesn't even have an IP address, right? The switch says, look, I'm just transparently passing electricity back and forth between my different my different interfaces here. I don't need an IP address. No one's actually going to talk to me. They're just going to talk through me. So yes, so going back to the original question, the cable modem, the DSL modem, you can think of it like a switch, right? It doesn't have an IP address. It's just sort of passing electricity through. But the reason we don't call it a switch is because a switch, all these cables would be of the same type, right? For example, if this is an Ethernet cable, the next one would be Ethernet, and the next one would be Ethernet. That's why we call them Ethernet switches, because everything connecting to it has a cable that looks like this, right? All the interfaces on that switch look like this form. And so as it's passing electricity through it, it's not changing that electricity in any type. It's not changing it from one format into another format. Whereas a cable modem or a DSL modem, well, the electricity that comes in here is changed fundamentally in some way when it goes out on this cable, because they're two different technologies. But it can be thought of like a switch, because it's just sort of transparently passing your message through. It's not even aware of necessarily that it's what network it's connected to. So yes, thank you, Bashar. That was a very good question. Okay, so we just finished this one. Now you might be saying, okay, Keith, I still have a problem. On my laptop, I looked around. I have a switch like this, and guess what? It was already turned on. Chances are it probably already is turned on. I mean, the only two reasons why this switch might be off is either you accidentally turned it off. Maybe you were feeling around on the side of your laptop or something and your fingernail happened to scratch it and it turned it off. Or somebody was messing around, right? You had a teenager in the house who was on your laptop last night without your knowledge, and they were playing around with it and they turned the switch off. But it shouldn't be off. You know, when you get a laptop or something from scratch from the electronics store and you unpackage it and plug it in, this switch should be on already. Okay, so we still have a problem. I'm doing wireless and my Wi-Fi access point, that's this device right here with the antennas, is turned on. You know, I see the little lights flashing on it. It's got a cable plugged into my cable or DSL modem. It's turned on because I see the lights flashing on it. It's plugged into the wall. I've verified that my external switch on my laptop is green, it's turned on, still not working. Okay, what's the next thing we can try? Well, inside your laptop, and this also applies to your tablet and your smartphone, there's software that talks to the Wi-Fi. There's a possibility that software could be turned off. Is the Wi-Fi radio turned on in your software? No. Now, how would you know this? Well, there's a couple of ways you could find this out. First thing would be, I think I have a graphic of this coming up here. Let's see here. Let's just go forward a couple of slides. Yeah, right here. Sort of skipping ahead, but look at this. Okay. Specifically, I want you to look at this graphic on the right. Look right above there, look right above the word R, where it says none of these are mine, and see right above the word R, how it's got these little bars and it's got a sort of an explosion signal, a little yellow bang on that. Sometimes it might show up with an exclamation point on there. Usually that means one of two things. Either your Wi-Fi radio is off, which means number one, check the switch. Is that physical switch on the side or the back of your laptop turned on? Or it means the Wi-Fi software in your laptop or tablet is disabled. And this can be for a very valid reason. For example, at my house, my little kids have some tablets. And right now they're at the age where I don't want them to have internet access. They're just too young. They don't know how to browse the internet, and if they did, most likely they would see something I don't want them to see. So what I do is in their tablets, I purposely disable the Wi-Fi software in their tablet. And so when they go to the Wi-Fi settings, if they actually knew how to do that, they would see some sort of symbol that looks like this. They might have an exclamation point through it, or maybe a slash through it or something, which means the Wi-Fi software is turned off. Now, in Windows, how would you determine that? Let's go back. Okay, so how you would determine that is, here's what you're going to want to do. Go ahead and follow along with me. What I'm about to do here, if you follow along with me, is not going to hurt anything, but I just want you to follow along with the steps if you can. So step number one is, once again, this is assuming you have Windows 7, click on your Start button. And in all the stuff you see there, you should see some mention of something called a control panel. For me, it's when I click the Start button, it's off to the right. Now, if you're in Windows 10, or now I'm not sure about Windows 10, but Windows 8, if you take your mouse and you scroll all the way up to the right-hand corner, you should see something that comes up that says like Settings or something. If you click on that, then you should see some mention of Control Panel. But you're going to want to get to your Control Panel, and when you get to that, you'll see something that looks like this. Now, we're talking about networking right here. So you would click on something that refers to network. Now, in my particular case, it says network and internet. So I'd click on that. And at this point, I would click on where it says, I'll just click on Network and Sharing Center. Network and Sharing Center. And then change adapter settings. So an adapter is your network interface card, and your device might have more than one. For example, my laptop has a minimum of 2 network interface cards. I've got a wired network interface card for plugging an Ethernet cable into, and I have sort of a built-in wireless network interface card. So if I want to modify those or change those, I would go here and click Change Adapter Settings. Now let me just turn off my Wi-Fi for a moment. So I'm going to turn off the switch to begin with. So here we go. It's off. And we should see here in just a moment, right here where it says wireless network connection, right there. See how it just said not connected and it's got a little X? That means one of two things is wrong. Either the switch is not turned on, which is what I just did, I turned it off, or the software is not turned on. Now, in this particular case, it's the switch. So I'll go ahead and turn the switch on. And it should connect to the Wi-Fi in just a moment. And now that little X is gone. Now, if it was actually the software that was disabled, now you might be wondering, in a laptop, how would my Wi-Fi software end up becoming disabled? The only way I can think of is somebody got onto your laptop and messed it up. Your Wi-Fi software should not just by itself, out of the blue, become disabled. But, you know, I know some of you guys, once again, have teenagers and stuff at home who use your laptop, and maybe they got into it and they did this. They went into your wireless, they right-clicked it, and they clicked disable. And so now it clearly says disabled. So you might be looking at your laptop and saying, what's going on? My switch is on, it says green, but I'm getting no Wi-Fi signal. Well, that's if you go into your network settings and go into your change adapter settings, right here, it says disabled. So you just right-click and hit enable. I suppose sometimes there could be some bugs in the software, or maybe something else in Windows could pop up, and if you click it, it turns off your Wi-Fi adapter. But that's how you would check. If it says disabled, you want to right-click that and hit enable, just like it shows you right here. And once again, you're going to want to wait about a minute because it's going to take that long to connect to the access point, learn of all the IP information it needs, and then hopefully your connectivity will be restored. Now let's say that's still not your problem. You say, okay, my switch on my laptop is turned on, or maybe in my tablet, I don't even have a switch. My Wi-Fi radio is turned on. I've checked that. Still don't have connectivity. Next thing you want to look for is somewhere on your tablet or your laptop, you should have some sort of graphic or icon that indicates if you're connected to a Wi-Fi network or not. Like in this particular case, if I see this, that means I'm not connected to a Wi-Fi network. Has your device discovered your own Wi-Fi network? Well, how do you find that? Well, once again, in Windows 7, if you scroll down to the very right-hand corner of your laptop, you should see something that looks like this, right? Where you've got your clock and your volume settings and whether it's powered on or not. There should be a little thing right here that has, you know, your Wi-Fi signal. If you click that just once, you might see one or more of these. Now, these are all Wi-Fi networks. Now, if you're doing this at home, hopefully you know what the name is of your Wi-Fi network. Either you set it up yourself, or maybe you had your son or your grandson set it up, or you know, maybe when Time Warner Cable came out, they set it up. But whoever set up the Wi-Fi network, they should have told you or written down on a piece of paper, here's your Wi-Fi network. It's called Clown, or here's your Wi-Fi network called Apex 123. But you should know what the name of your Wi-Fi network is. If you don't know, go back to the person who set up the Wi-Fi network for you in the first place and ask them. Now, maybe you look at this list and you say, the name of what my Wi-Fi network is Clown, and I don't see Clown anywhere here in this list. Well, that would first of all explain why you don't have any network connectivity, because even though your Wi-Fi radio is saying, hey, is Clown out there? Is there a network called Clown? It's not finding one. So in this particular case, you might just be too far away from the access point. You know, I have a situation where in my home, my Wi-Fi access point is on the first floor in the far corner. And sometimes when I'm on the second floor at the far end of the house, I can't connect to it because I'm so far away that the Wi-Fi signal from that access point just can't reach me as it goes through walls and bookcases and filing cabinets and stuff like that. It gets weaker and weaker and weaker. and it could get so weak that you don't see it. So one solution is try to move closer to it. Now let's say you say, hey look, I'm pretty close. You know, this Wi-Fi access point is on the first floor, just like me. It's in the office on the first floor, and I'm in the kitchen on the first floor, and I'm only literally like maybe 30 feet away from the access point. Why can't I connect to it? Why don't I see my network? Just like I mentioned, Wi-Fi signals, as they pass through things like human bodies, walls, filing cabinets, especially metal. Metal is a killer of Wi-Fi signals. Some of you guys in your house, if you actually opened up your wall, you would see you've got like metal studs and a lot of metal in your walls. That will kill a Wi-Fi signal. So if you've got a lot of metal between you and your access point, you could literally be on the other side of the wall. Right? Your access point could literally be 15 feet, 10 feet away from you. But if you've got filing cabinets, a whole bunch of junk between you, you might not even see your Wi-Fi signal. You might not see your network because there's just too much interference. It's just killing the signal. So in that particular case, pretty much the only choice you have is to move your access point. Try to put it somewhere else in your house where all that metal and stuff is not blocking the signal. That would basically be it. So what have we troubleshooted so far? So as far as Wi-Fi is considered, we looked at the switch on your laptop, made sure it was turned to green, made sure it was turned on. That was good. We went into the software, we went into the control panel and made sure that the software was turned on, which it should be by default. It should not be off. And then if we did not see our Wi-Fi network, it was one of really just two things. Either the access point's not turned on, that's possible, right? Maybe you just unplugged it by accident, it's not turned on. Or you're too far away from it, or there's too much interference between you and your access point. One other possibility. A lot of devices, a lot of networking devices, when you add a configuration to them, you know, when you give them an IP address, or in the case of a Wi-Fi access point, you configure a network saying this network will be called Clown or Cisco 123 or whatever. A lot of these devices, when you change them, you have to save the configuration. You have to save it. Because if you don't save it and the device loses power, like you have a power outage in your house, or you accidentally unplugged it, guess what? All those changes, gone, vanished, lost. So that could be a fourth reason in this case. You know, maybe this particular kind of access point is of the type that you need to save your changes and you didn't do that. Or maybe, you know, your grandson or your daughter who set this up didn't do that. And so it was working just fine, but all of a sudden it's not working anymore. Well, you think, well, wait a second. About 30 minutes ago, we had a temporary power outage in my house. Power came back, but guess what? All those unsaved changes in your access point, boop, they're gone. And all that stuff that your grandson or your son or your daughter set up for you has vanished. And that's why you can't connect it to it anymore. So that could be another reason as well. There were unsaved changes that just got lost due to removing of power. Somebody's asking another question. Do most Wi-Fi access points cover about the same amount of space? Generally speaking, yes. You know, depending on the vendor that you're looking at, some vendors will say that their Wi-Fi access point can cover longer distances than others. Most Wi-Fi access points, though, you know, whether you buy a Cisco one or a Ruckus one or something else, should work in your house. Now, if you're trying to put it in like a warehouse that's, you know, 100 feet end to end, then it might be a little bit more of a consideration about which vendor do I buy. Netgear, Cisco, Ruckus, you know, which one do I pick? But if you're talking about using a Wi-Fi access point at your home, really shouldn't matter all that much. Usually when you can't connect to your Wi-Fi access point at home, it's because there's just too much stuff in between. You know, there's too many walls, too many desks, too much furniture, too much metal in between. And that is usually the reason why you can't connect to it. It's not that the signal is weak, it's just that the signal just can't push through some of that stuff.